shout out goes out to our current channel members. If you were interested in picking up a channel membership for as little as $1.99 a month, head over to my channel profile and hit the join button to view all of the available perks. Thanks. Ninjago has had two endings in a way. Season 2, where the entire series was originally set to end, along with Season 10, which was an ending to the Masters of Spinjitzu section of Ninjago. Today, however, we are going to be examining just one of these quote-unquote endings and taking a look at how and why it ultimately ended up completely flopping. When it comes to Season 10 of Ninjago, also known as March of the Oni, there's ultimately not too much to bash it for. It did have some great concepts, some very solid character arcs in the form of Garmadon's arc, mainly if we're being honest, but it had a lot of good elements intertwined. So, how did it fail? Well, to me, there's not that many small individual issues with it overall. Instead, I think there's just a few pretty major issues, if that makes any sense. To begin with, I think the runtime held it back the most. Having just 4 episodes to align with the 100th episode of the show was a horrible idea, to be honest, and this season should not have been centered around that milestone at all. Instead, I believe this season would have been so much better if it was a full 10 episodes long, maybe even 13 episodes long if we are really going all out here. Only seasons 1 and 2 had that many episodes in total. Considering those were the original seasons, I think it would have been both a kind of nice callback to those seasons, but at the same time it obviously would have been great for Season 10 for more technical reasons, as it would have allowed the season to flesh out its main themes and characters so much more, instead of trying to pack so many different aspects into just 4 episodes. That was ultimately its biggest downfall in my opinion. Packing in so many different themes, characters and story arcs just wasn't the way to go about it. So in conclusion, for this particular point, Season 10 had some amazing concepts, but the fact that it had just 4 episodes to try and expand on all of this did not do it any favours and ended up setting the season up for total catastrophe. So now that the main foundation for my upcoming points has been explained there, I think it's time we took a look at my second biggest issue with the season. The villains. You see, the Oni were set up to be these crazy, absolute demon-type villains right from the very beginning of the Oni trilogy, and so for a long while, before March of the Oni, the Ninjago community had extremely high hopes when it came to these villains, but ultimately, lack of development for them as actual characters, and also a lack of screen time for them, held them back entirely, and they ended up being mindless zombies. Now, while I don't think that idea and trope is necessarily bad in the context of the Oni here, I think that adding at least a little more extra spice to them would have helped mould them into becoming much better villains. This can also be said for the leader of the Oni, the Omega. If the Omega was expanded on a lot more, I think he had endless potential. His fight with Garmadon alone was enough to make me very invested in his character, but a lack of proper character showcase and development held him back so much, which is another aspect where March of the Oni flopped pretty heavily. Something else I'd like to touch on here is something that isn't really brought up as much as it should be in my opinion, and this may sound weird, but I think Cole's fall was another really extremely low point for this season. To start with, I found this arc to be a complete waste of time, straight up. Ninjago has an extremely long history of executing death fake-outs with his characters, but what's really the point of doing this when the character's supposed death is confirmed to be a fake-out within the next episode? Not only does it seem entirely pointless to me, I think it also wastes a lot of the very precious, limited runtime Season 10 had been given, for literally no reason. Nothing really happened because of this, it didn't really benefit the season at all, nothing. For example though, this runtime could have been used to focus on actual important things. For example, as I mentioned before, why not use this limited time to expand on the Oni and the Omega himself? That would have been a much better use of this time, but instead we're just left with a pretty sloppy death scene that ends up being a fake out within the next episode. The only part of this arc I would label as good would be the scene with the ninja moments after, when they realise they can't save Cole. That was honestly a pretty solid scene, but definitely wasn't worth the waste of runtime for this season in my opinion. Speaking of deaths, Lloyd's was pretty mixed all things considered. While I was a fairly big fan of the scene in which he finally gets to meet the first Spinjitzu master, after just coming out of a death fake-out in the form of Cole's, having another so soon after I just do not think was the right decision here. I would have been a lot happier if this was Lloyd's actual final death. I think it would have been a fine end to his character, but for the sake of being realistic, having none of this happen in the first place would have been a better idea, and perhaps Lloyd meeting the first Benjutsu Master was done by some other means. So in conclusion here, having a Lloyd death fake out straight after Cole's was really not a good idea and felt pretty sloppy and ultimately completely pointless. Last but definitely not least, the final battle for the season. While I did find it to be solid in some areas, overall it just wasn't exciting to me, and didn't feel like a smooth, satisfying conclusion to the Oni, who had previously been built up to be these crazy evil beings. The fight simply felt underwhelming and did not match what we had been previously told about the Oni in seasons past. I think a much more intense battle would have been better, and having their defeat executed in a different manner would have been even better. As it is though, the final battle for Season 10 shared a theme this season had overall. Bland and underwhelming. That's the best way to describe this, and this is also another reason as to why having a higher episode count would have been a much better idea in literally every single way possible. So I hope I've been able to share my thoughts on this in a concise and clear manner. It had to be said, and it's something I've thought this entire time. Whether you agree or disagree with me though, I do hope you were able to kind of take something away from this video, and so I do thank you all for watching. All I'm going to ask is that you leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it, and if you're interested in watching more content similar to this, why not subscribe to the channel right now and click that notification bell so you guys can be alerted whenever I post more. With this being said, thank you all for watching, and I will see you all again soon. Goodbye.